"I'm sorry. I didn't know he hadn't told you." Those were the first words I heard when I woke up from the surgery. The doctor pulled the curtains shut around my hospital bed and whispered, "Your son approved a second surgery, one you never consented to." My world collapsed in that instant. I, Carol, at 67 years old, had only gone in to have my gallbladder removed. It was a minor, routine surgery, but when I woke up from the anesthesia, I felt confused. My body didn't feel the way it should. The smell of antiseptic hit me like a cold slap as I tried to process the doctor's words. The ceiling lights blinded me for a moment, and my head felt like it was stuffed with wet cotton. My hands trembled as I tried to touch my abdomen, where there should have been only a small scar. But there were bandages everywhere, far more extensive than I had ever imagined. "Told me what?" I asked in a shaky voice, though deep in my heart, I already sensed the answer would shatter me. The young doctor, her eyes full of a mixture of compassion and nervousness, sat in the chair beside my bed. She held a thick folder under her arm, one that seemed to contain secrets that would change my life forever. Her hands shook as she opened my medical chart. The sound of the pages turning echoed in my ears like gunshots. "Mrs. Miller, your son Michael signed an authorization for a second procedure while you were under anesthesia, a surgery that wasn't in your original plans." My heart stopped completely. Michael, my dear 42-year-old son, whom I had trusted blindly, the same one who had been with me early that morning, with his reassuring smile, telling me everything would go perfectly, the one who had promised he'd be waiting for me when I woke up. A metallic taste filled my mouth as the memories of that morning came flooding back. I remembered vividly how I had arrived at the hospital in my favorite pink dress, the one he had given me for my 65th birthday. I had done my hair carefully, because I always believed one should look presentable, even at the hospital. My handbag was perfectly organized, with my documents, my rosary, and a photograph of my late husband, Edward. Michael had been so attentive that morning. He had made me my favorite breakfast, buttered toast with strawberry jam and coffee with plenty of cream, just how I've liked it since I was a little girl. He had insisted on driving me to the hospital himself, even though I told him I could take a taxi. "Mom, I'm not letting you go to a surgery alone," he had said with that smile that always melted my heart. In the car, we had listened to music from my youth. Michael had put on the Frank Sinatra songs I loved so much, and I had hummed along softly while he drove. He had held my hand at stoplights and told me, "Everything's going to be fine, Mom. It's just a minor surgery. In a few hours, we'll be back home, watching our afternoon soaps." Vanessa, his wife, had arrived at the hospital later with a bouquet of white flowers that smelled too sweet, almost cloying. She had kissed my forehead with cold lips and whispered that they would wait for me until I woke up. Her green eyes had glinted in a strange way when she told me, "Don't you worry about a thing, Carol. Michael and I will take care of everything." Now, those words echoed in my mind with a completely different meaning. "We'll take care of everything." What had she really meant? What kind of surgery? I managed to articulate as tears began to cloud my vision. My voice sounded broken, like that of a woman who had just discovered the worst betrayal of her life. The doctor took a deep breath before answering, as if gathering the courage to say something terrible. Her fingers fidgeted nervously with her pen as she avoided my gaze. "A minor neurological procedure. Your son alleged that you had been showing signs of mental confusion and that he had previously discussed with other doctors the need to evaluate certain brain structures to rule out the onset of senile dementia." The words fell on me like sharp stones. Mental confusion, senile dementia, brain evaluation. It all began to make a horrible, twisted kind of sense. My mind, still foggy from the anesthesia, struggled to grasp the magnitude of what I was hearing. "But I don't have any memory problems," I whispered, feeling my voice crack. "I manage my own finances. I cook, I read my books, I talk to my friends on the phone. I don't understand why." The doctor nodded sadly. "Mrs. Miller, according to the documents your son presented, you have supposedly been forgetting important conversations, losing things, having episodes of disorientation. He even submitted a report from a private geriatrician who allegedly evaluated you last month." My blood ran cold. I had never visited any geriatrician. I had never had conversations about my mental health with Michael. Everything that doctor was describing was a complete lie, an elaborate fabrication my own son had constructed while I trusted him completely. "That's impossible," I murmured. But my voice sounded weak even to myself. "I've never seen a geriatrician. I've never had memory problems. Michael is lying to me." The doctor closed her eyes for a moment, as if the weight of the situation was too much for her as well. When she opened them, I saw a mix of compassion and something that looked like professional guilt. "Mrs. Miller, I'm just a resident. I had no part in the decision to perform the second surgery. When I came on my shift this morning, both procedures had already been completed. But when I read your file and saw the circumstances," her voice broke slightly, "I felt I had to tell you. It didn't seem right for you to wake up not knowing what really happened." Tears began to roll down my cheeks. This young doctor, a complete stranger, had shown more honesty and compassion toward me than my own son. The pain in my chest wasn't just physical. It was as if someone had grabbed my heart with their bare hands and was squeezing it until it shattered into pieces. "Where is he now?" I asked, feeling the betrayal slowly turn into a rage I had never experienced before. "Where is Michael? He left a few hours ago. He said he had some important matters to take care of and would be back this afternoon to take you home." The doctor paused. "He also mentioned something about speaking with social workers about long-term care options for you." The world swayed around me. Long-term care options. The words echoed in my head like funeral bells. It was all starting to fit together in a grotesque and terrifying way. The unauthorized neurological surgery, the fake medical reports, the non-existent dementia evaluations, and now social workers assessing care options. My son hadn't just betrayed me. My son was trying to have me declared mentally incompetent. "Doctor," I said, my voice surprisingly firmer than I felt inside, "I need to see every document Michael submitted. I need to know exactly what he signed and what he authorized in my name." She hesitated, glancing toward the door as if afraid someone might be listening. "Mrs. Miller, I'm not sure I can." "It's my body," I interrupted, and for the first time in hours, my voice had real authority. "It's my brain that was operated on without my consent. I have a right to know what was done to me and under what pretenses." The doctor nodded slowly and began pulling documents from the folder. The sound of crinkling paper filled the room, like the whisper of terrible secrets being revealed. When she placed the first papers in front of me, my heart nearly stopped. The signature wasn't mine. On the consent form for the neurological surgery, there was a signature that vaguely resembled mine, but it clearly had not come from my hand. Someone had forged my authorization. "Doctor," I whispered, pointing at the signature with a trembling finger, "this is not my signature. Someone forged my consent." Her eyes widened. She leaned over the document, examining it carefully, and then compared the signature with others from my medical file from previous years. "My God," she murmured. "You're right. The signatures are completely different. The slant of the letters, the pressure of the pen, even the size, it's all different." A chill ran down my entire body. Not only had they operated on my brain without my consent, but they had forged legal documents to do it. This wasn't just a family betrayal. This was a crime. "There's more," the doctor continued, pulling out other papers. "Here's the supposed report from the geriatrician who evaluated your mental state last month." I took the document with shaky hands. The report was filled with detailed observations about episodes of confusion that had never happened, conversations I never had, symptoms I never experienced. According to this paper, I had forgotten my late husband's name during a consultation, gotten lost on my way home from the grocery store, and had multiple episodes of unexplained aggression. It was all a lie. Every word, every observation, every preliminary diagnosis was a complete fabrication. But it was so well written, so professionally presented, that any doctor who read it would believe I was, in fact, developing senile dementia. "The doctor who supposedly wrote this report," I said, reading the name at the bottom of the document, "do you know him?" The doctor shook her head. "Dr. Ryan Miller. I've never heard of him at this hospital, and according to the address listed here, his clinic is on the other side of town." Something in my mind clicked. Ryan. That name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. I closed my eyes, trying to remember, and then it hit me like a bolt of lightning. Ryan was Vanessa's maiden name. Her younger brother was named Ryan, and he had studied something related to medicine, though he never finished his degree. The last time Vanessa mentioned him, she'd said he was doing administrative work at a private clinic. "My daughter-in-law," I whispered, feeling the puzzle pieces fall into place. "Her brother's name is Ryan. He wrote this fake report." The conspiracy was much deeper than I had imagined. It wasn't just Michael who had betrayed me. It was Michael and Vanessa working together, even using their own family members to fabricate false medical evidence. They had planned this carefully, meticulously, for weeks or maybe even months. But why? What did they gain by having me declared mentally incompetent? And then I remembered the conversation I had overheard by chance 3 weeks ago. I had arrived early at Michael's house for a family dinner, and I heard them talking in the kitchen. Vanessa was saying something about your mother's house and those savings she has tucked away. At the time, I thought they were just worried about my financial security in my old age. But now those words took on a completely sinister meaning. My house, my savings, my inheritance. They had planned to have me declared mentally incompetent to take control of my assets. The unauthorized brain surgery wasn't just to create medical evidence of cognitive problems. It was to cause real cognitive problems. They wanted me to wake up confused, disoriented, perhaps with minor neurological damage that would support their claims of dementia. The horror of the realization hit me like an avalanche. My own son had authorized them to open my skull and tamper with my brain for money for a house and some bank accounts. He had been willing to destroy my mind and my autonomy forever. "Doctor," I said, and my voice now held a steely determination I didn't know I possessed. "I need you to document all of this. I need copies of all these forged documents. And I need you to discharge me right now." "Mrs. Miller, I can't discharge you immediately," the doctor said with genuine concern. "You've just been through 2 surgeries. Your body needs time to recover. And besides, there are protocols." "Protocols?" I cut her off, feeling rage ignite in my chest like a wildfire. "The only protocols I see here are the ones my son and his wife have violated to steal my life. If I stay in this hospital one more day, they'll come back with more fake papers, more bought-off doctors, more lies." The doctor bit her lower lip, clearly torn between her medical duty and what she knew was morally right. Her eyes darted to the closed door, as if she feared someone might walk in at any moment. "Doctor, what is your name?" I asked softly. "Dr. Patricia Evans," she replied. "Patricia, you have parents." She nodded slowly. "And what if one day you woke up in a hospital and discovered that someone had authorized surgeries on their brain without their knowledge, with forged documents, for the sole purpose of stealing everything they had worked for their entire life? Would you sit still and wait for them to come back and finish the job?" Patricia's eyes filled with tears. I could see the exact moment her doctor's heart surrendered to her daughter's heart. "Okay," she whispered, "but you have to promise me you'll seek medical attention if you feel unwell. Brain surgeries, even minor ones, can have unpredictable side effects." "I promise," I said, taking her hand in mine. "But right now I need to get out of here before they come back." Patricia worked quickly, preparing my discharge paperwork and making copies of all the fraudulent documents Michael had submitted. Meanwhile, I tried to call my sister Rachel from the hospital phone. Rachel was 5 years younger than me, but she had always been fiercer, more suspicious of the world. If anyone could help me right now, it was her. "Carol, what are you doing calling me from the hospital?" Rachel answered, her voice worried. "Weren't you supposed to be home resting by now?" "Rachel," I said, and my voice broke immediately. "I need you to come get me, now, and don't tell anyone you're coming, especially not Michael." There was a silence on the other end of the line. Rachel knew me well enough to know I would never ask for something like that without a very serious reason. "What happened, sis? I can't explain over the phone. Just come, please. And Rachel, bring Arthur with you." Arthur was the lawyer who had handled our parents' legal affairs when they died, an older, trustworthy man who had known our family for decades. If what I suspected was true, I was going to need legal representation immediately. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, Rachel said without any more questions. That's what I loved most about my younger sister. When family was in trouble, she acted first and asked questions later. While I waited, Patricia helped me change out of the hospital gown and into my clothes. My pink dress was wrinkled and stained, but it was mine, and putting it on made me feel like I was reclaiming a part of my identity that had been violated. "Mrs. Miller," Patricia said as she helped me with the buttons, "there's something else you should know. When your son filled out the papers for the additional surgery, he also signed something called a temporary medical power of attorney. Basically, that gives him the legal authority to make all your medical decisions while you're under hospital care." My blood ran cold. What does that mean, exactly? It means that, technically, he has the legal right to keep you admitted here for as long as he deems necessary for your recovery and evaluation. If he comes back and says you're not ready to go home, the hospital would have to abide by his decision. The horror of the situation intensified. They hadn't just operated on my brain without permission, they had created a legal trap to keep me imprisoned in the hospital until they achieved their goals. "How long is that power of attorney valid for?" I asked in a trembling voice. "According to the document, until you are evaluated by a mental health board and declared competent to make your own medical decisions." It was a perfect trap. With the fake documents they had submitted suggesting senile dementia, and with the effects of the brain surgery causing potential confusion, it would be almost impossible to convince a mental health board that I was fully competent. Especially if that board included Dr. Ryan Miller, Vanessa's brother, who had written the initial fake report. "Patricia," I said, grabbing her arm in desperation, "if my son comes back before my sister gets here, will you help me? Would you say that I'm competent to make my own decisions?" She nodded firmly. "Of course. And I have all these documents photocopied as evidence of what's really going on here." Just then, we heard familiar voices in the hallway. My heart stopped. It was Michael's voice, talking to someone else, probably a nurse or a hospital administrator. "Yes, my mother has been very confused lately," he was saying in that concerned voice I had believed was genuine for years. "The doctor said the additional surgery might help diagnose the problem, but I think she's going to need specialized care after this." Patricia and I looked at each other in panic. He had come back sooner than expected, and from the sound of his conversation, he was already laying the groundwork for the next phase of his plan. "I have to get out of here," I whispered. Patricia ran to my room's window. We were on the second floor, but there was an external fire escape right next to it. "Can you walk?" she asked urgently. Although I felt weak and dizzy, the adrenaline was giving me strength I didn't know I had. "I can try." Patricia opened the window carefully. The cool afternoon air hit my face, and for a moment, I felt like a prisoner tasting freedom for the first time in years. "Mrs. Miller," Patricia said, putting the copies of all the documents into a plastic bag. "Take this. It's all the evidence you'll need to prove what they did to you. And take my phone number, too. If you need me to testify about what we found today, I will." Tears streamed down my cheeks. This young doctor, who had known me for just a few hours, was risking her career to help me. Meanwhile, the son I had raised and loved for 42 years had been planning to rob me of my dignity, my autonomy, and my future. "Patricia, I can never thank you enough," I said, taking her hands. "You gave me my life back. You're giving yourself your own life back. I'm just giving you the tools to fight." The voices in the hallway were getting closer. Michael would probably be at my door in less than a minute. Carefully, I started to climb out the window onto the fire escape. Every step hurt, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the pain of betrayal I carried in my heart. As I slowly descended the metal steps, I could hear Michael entering my room. "Where's my mother?" he shouted. "She's gone," Patricia replied, with admirable calm. "She signed her own discharge papers and left. That's impossible. She can't make those decisions. She's mentally incapacitated." "Sir, your mother was perfectly lucid when she left. More lucid than you'd like her to be. When I reached the parking lot, my legs were shaking like leaves in the wind. Every step reminded me that I had just literally escaped out the window of a hospital after 2 surgeries, but the adrenaline and rage kept me going. I hid behind some cars, waiting to see Rachel's car, my heart pounding so hard I thought the whole world could hear it. A few minutes later, I saw my sister's old green Buick pull into the lot. Rachel had always had a sixth sense for family emergencies. She had even brought Arthur, just as I'd asked. The lawyer got out of the car with his black briefcase and that serious expression he had perfected over decades of solving complicated legal problems. "Rachel," I called out softly, stepping out from my hiding place. My sister ran to me and wrapped me in a hug that nearly made me collapse. Her gray hair smelled of the same chamomile shampoo she'd used since we were young, and for a moment, I felt like we were little girls again, protecting each other from the world. "Carol, you look terrible," she said, pulling back to examine my face. "What on earth is going on here?" "We need to go before Michael comes down," I said urgently. "I'll explain everything in the car." Arthur approached with his characteristic professional calm. "Carol, are you in some kind of legal trouble?" "The worst kind of legal trouble you can imagine," I replied, handing him the bag with the documents Patricia had given me. My own son forged my signature to authorize an unconsented brain surgery, all to have me declared mentally incompetent and steal my inheritance. Arthur's expression changed instantly from professional curiosity to genuine horror. In his 40 years of legal practice, he had seen a lot of things, but I could see in his eyes that this had deeply shocked him. We quickly got into Rachel's car. As she drove toward her house, I told them the whole story from the beginning. I showed them the forged documents, explained about Dr. Ryan Miller, who was likely Vanessa's brother, and described how I had woken up not knowing my brain had been operated on. Rachel had to pull the car over twice because she was shaking with rage. "That bastard," she muttered under her breath. "I always knew there was something off about Vanessa, but I never thought Michael would be capable of something like this." Arthur examined each document carefully, making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished my story, he closed the folder and looked at me with a seriousness that chilled my blood. "Carol, this isn't just family betrayal. This is criminal conspiracy, forgery, medical battery, and possibly attempted elder fraud. We're talking about charges that could send Michael and Vanessa to prison for years." The words felt surreal. Prison. My son in prison. 24 hours ago, I was a proud mother preparing for a minor surgery with the support of her loving family. Now, I was the victim of an elaborate crime perpetrated by the very people I trusted most. "But first," Arthur continued, "we need to secure your immediate legal safety. With that temporary medical power of attorney Michael signed, he can try to have you involuntarily committed. He could call the police and say you're a danger to yourself because of your dementia. He can do that?" I asked, horrified. "With the forged documents he submitted, yes, at least temporarily, until we can prove they're fraudulent. We need to get you to a safe place and start building your defense immediately." Rachel pulled up in front of her house, a small but cozy place she had bought after her divorce. She had always been more independent than me, more wary of depending on others. Now, I envied that independence. "You're staying here with me," Rachel declared as she opened the front door. "And the first person who tries to take you out of my house will have to go through me." That night, sitting in Rachel's kitchen with cups of hot tea, I could finally process everything that had happened. Arthur had gone back to his office to start investigating the real Dr. Ryan Miller and prepare a legal strategy, but he had made it clear the situation was grave. "Carol," Rachel said, taking my hand across the table, "there's something I never told you because I didn't want to cause family problems." I looked at her expectantly. "About 6 months ago, Michael called me asking about Mom and Dad's will. He wanted to know exactly what you had inherited, how much the house was worth, if you had any bank accounts he didn't know about. When I asked him why he wanted to know, he said he was worried about your financial security in your old age." My stomach clenched. "What did you tell him?" "I told him it was none of his business, that if he had concerns, he should talk to you directly." "But Carol," the way he was asking, it didn't sound like a son's concern. It sounded like someone taking inventory. The pieces kept fitting into the horrible puzzle that was my new reality. Michael had been planning this for months. The gallbladder surgery had probably just been the perfect opportunity to execute a plan he already had fully developed. "There's more," Rachel continued. "Last week, Vanessa came to visit me. She's never done that before. She started making comments about how worried she was about you, that she'd seen you looking confused lately, that maybe it was time to consider a retirement home." "They were laying the groundwork," I murmured, "creating a narrative." "Exactly. And when I told her I'd seen you, and you were perfectly fine, Vanessa told me that maybe I wasn't seeing the signs because I was getting to be that age too. The nerve of her, suggesting I might be developing dementia as well. The audacity of the plan took my breath away. They hadn't just attacked my mental competence, they had tried to isolate me from my sister, my only reliable family support, by suggesting she wasn't reliable either due to her age. I slept little that night. Every noise made me jump, thinking Michael had found where I was and was coming with the authorities to take me back to the hospital. But something else kept me awake, too, a cold, determined anger I had never felt before in my life. For 67 years, I had been the woman who kept the peace, who avoided conflict, who put her family's needs before her own. I had raised Michael with unconditional love, supported him in every decision, accepted Vanessa into the family even when my gut told me something wasn't right with her. But that Carol had died in that hospital bed when I woke up to the betrayal. The woman now lying in Rachel's guest bed was different. She was a woman who had been pushed past her limit and who now understood that boundless kindness could be a dangerous weakness. The next morning, Arthur arrived early with news. I've looked into Dr. Ryan Miller and confirmed our suspicions. He doesn't exist, he announced, sitting at the kitchen table with a folder full of documents. I've checked every state medical board, professional association, and specialist directory. There is no Dr. Ryan Miller with the credentials described in that report. So it's definitely Vanessa's brother, I said. More than that, I've looked into Ryan Herrera, which is Vanessa's brother's real name. He has a record for document forgery and was expelled from medical school 10 years ago for academic misconduct. The conspiracy was even deeper than I had imagined. They hadn't just used a family member to create fake documents. They had specifically used someone with a history of fraud to do it. We have enough evidence to press criminal charges, Arthur continued. But Carol, I also have bad news. Michael filed an emergency petition with the court this morning to have you mentally evaluated and placed in protective custody. My heart sank. What does that mean? It means we have a court hearing in 3 days. If the judge determines you are mentally incompetent based on the documents Michael submitted, they will place you under a legal conservatorship. You will lose the right to make your own financial, medical, and personal decisions. 3 days, I repeated, feeling panic rise in my throat like ice water. Only 3 days to prove I'm not crazy. Arthur nodded gravely. The court treats these cases as emergencies when there's alleged evidence of rapid mental decline. Michael submitted a sworn affidavit saying that after the surgery you're showing signs of severe paranoia, that you escaped the hospital against medical advice, and that you're now making irrational accusations against your own family. But we have the forged documents, I exclaimed, the injustice burning inside me. We have proof that it's all a lie. I know, and we're going to present all that evidence. But Carol, you need to understand something. The legal system is designed to protect the elderly from abuse, but it's also designed to protect them from themselves when there's evidence of dementia. Judges tend to be very conservative in these cases. If there's any doubt, they prefer to err on the side of caution. Rachel slammed her fist on the table. This is bullshit. My sister is more lucid than half the politicians in Washington, and they're going to treat her like a lost child. The problem, Arthur continued, is that Michael has been very clever. He not only submitted fake medical documents, but he has also secured witness statements from people who have apparently observed your erratic behavior. What witnesses? I asked in a trembling voice. Arthur consulted his notes. Vanessa, of course. But also someone named Linda Fisher, who says she's your neighbor and has noticed you've been acting strangely lately. My blood ran cold. Linda Fisher was indeed my neighbor, but she lived 3 houses down, and we barely exchanged more than polite greetings when we ran into each other at the supermarket. I had no idea how Michael had gotten her to sign a statement about my behavior. What exactly does the statement say? I asked. That she's seen you leave your house in your underwear on several occasions. That you've been talking to yourself in the garden. That you once mistook her for your deceased sister Carmen and tried to invite her inside for tea. Each accusation was a stab in the heart. Carmen had died 15 years ago, and I had never mistaken anyone for her. I had never gone outside in my underwear. And if I talked to myself in the garden, it was because that's how I had processed grief my whole life. A harmless habit I'd had since childhood. Michael knows all my habits. I murmured. He's been in my life long enough to take normal things and twist them until they sound like symptoms of dementia. Exactly, Arthur agreed. That's why we need a very solid strategy for the hearing. We can't just defend ourselves. We have to attack. We have to prove this whole situation is an elaborate conspiracy to seize your assets. The next 3 days were the most intense of my life. Arthur worked day and night preparing our case. He contacted Patricia Evans, the resident who had helped me escape the hospital, and she agreed to testify about the irregularities in the medical documents and the unauthorized nature of the brain surgery. He also dug deeper into Ryan Herrera, Vanessa's brother. Not only did he have a record for forgery, but he had been arrested twice for fraud schemes specifically targeting senior citizens. He had worked at several private clinics that were later shut down for fraudulent practices. Meanwhile, Rachel became my personal private investigator. She went to talk to Linda Fisher to try to understand how they had gotten her to sign that false statement. I found her in her yard, Rachel reported back that afternoon. At first, she refused to talk to me, but when I explained what was happening, she went pale as a ghost. What did she tell you? That Vanessa had visited her 2 weeks ago. She told her she was worried about your mental health and asked if she had noticed anything strange in your behavior. When Linda said no, Vanessa insisted, suggesting specific things that might have happened. Like what? Like going out in inappropriate clothing or talking to people who weren't there. Linda says Vanessa was very persuasive, that she kept pushing until Linda finally admitted that maybe she had seen something, though she wasn't sure. Vanessa immediately pulled out some papers and asked her to sign a statement, "For your own good." It was pure psychological manipulation. Vanessa had used interrogation techniques to plant false memories in the mind of an older woman who likely felt confused and pressured by the whole situation. "Is Linda going to help us?" I asked hopefully. "She's terrified," Rachel admitted. "She says she didn't know she was signing something that would be used in court. But yes, she agreed to make a statement correcting her previous testimony." That night, alone in my temporary room, I mentally reviewed my entire estate. The house Edward and I had bought 40 years ago was now worth almost $600,000 due to the neighborhood's gentrification. My savings accounts and certificates of deposit added up to another $250,000. My life insurance policy was worth $150,000. It was nearly $1 million in total. Enough money for 2 unscrupulous people to be willing to destroy an old woman's mind to get it. But there was something else that bothered me, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The precision of the plan, the sophistication of the legal and medical manipulation, the way they had anticipated every possible obstacle. This wasn't something Michael had devised alone. He was smart, but he wasn't a criminal mastermind. The morning of the hearing, Arthur arrived at Rachel's house with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It seemed like a mix of hope and concern. "I have news," he announced. "Good and bad." "Give me the bad first," I said, steeling myself. "I've looked into the judge who will be presiding over your hearing, Judge Morrison. He has a reputation for being very conservative in cases of elder mental competency. In the last 5 years, he's ruled in favor of a protective conservatorship in 85% of the cases he's seen." My heart sank. "And the good news? I found something else about this conspiracy that could change everything," Arthur said, opening his briefcase. "Remember I mentioned that Ryan Herrera had worked at several clinics that were shut down for fraud?" I nodded. "Well, one of those clinics specialized in something very specific, helping families obtain legal guardianship over wealthy elders to access their estates. They had a whole system: fake doctors, fabricated medical reports, witnesses trained to give convincing testimony about mental decline." The room started to spin around me. "Are you saying this is part of a larger operation?" "I'm saying your son and daughter-in-law possibly hired the services of an organized criminal network that specializes in this type of fraud. And if that's true, then I'm not their first victim?" Arthur placed a thick folder on the table. "I've found records of at least 12 similar cases in the last 3 years. Healthy, mentally competent seniors who were suddenly declared incapacitated after minor surgeries resulted in unauthorized brain procedures." The scale of the situation hit me like an avalanche. I wasn't just a victim of my family's betrayal. I was a victim of a sophisticated criminal operation that had perfected the art of stealing the autonomy and assets of elderly people. Arthur, I said in a trembling voice, if this is as big as it seems, do we really have a chance of winning today? He looked me straight in the eye. Carol, we're going to do more than win. We're going to expose this entire criminal network and make sure they can never do this to another family again. The courtroom was more crowded than I had expected. Besides Michael and Vanessa, who were sitting on the other side of the room with their lawyer, there were several people I didn't recognize. Arthur explained in a low voice that some were reporters from local papers, as he had leaked information about the case to create public pressure. Publicity helps us, he murmured. Judges don't want to appear in the newspapers as accomplices to elder fraud. When Judge Morrison entered, my heart nearly stopped. He was an older man with white hair and a stern expression that immediately reminded me of my late father when he was angry. His eyes seemed to assess everything in the room with surgical precision. This is the case of Michael Miller versus Carol Miller, the court clerk announced. Petition for emergency conservatorship due to mental incompetence. Michael's lawyer, a slick man in a gray suit who looked like he had walked out of a Hollywood movie, rose first. His presentation was devastatingly effective. He spoke about my supposed mental decline with a conviction that almost made me doubt my own sanity. Your Honor, he said in a grave, concerned voice, we are here today because a loving family is desperately trying to protect their matriarch from the dangers of a rapidly progressing dementia, to Mrs. Carol Miller, age 67, has shown alarming signs of cognitive decline in recent weeks. He presented the forged report from Dr. Ryan Miller as if it were gospel. He read every invented symptom with a seriousness that made me nauseous. Paranoia, episodes of aggression, short-term memory loss, temporal and spatial disorientation. More troubling still, the lawyer continued, after a routine medical surgery, Mrs. Miller escaped from the hospital against medical advice, putting her life in danger. She is now making irrational accusations against her own family, alleging elaborate conspiracies that are clearly the product of a mind afflicted by dementia. When Michael took the stand to testify, I could barely recognize the man I had raised. His performance was perfect. Genuine-looking tears streamed down his cheeks as he described how painful it was to watch his beloved mother get lost in mental confusion. She's the strongest woman I've ever known, he said, his voice breaking. She raised me alone after my father died, worked 2 jobs to give me an education. She was always my hero. To see her like this, it's heartbreaking. His tears seemed so real that for a moment, I doubted myself. Was it possible I really was confused? That this whole situation was the product of some brain damage caused by the surgery? But then Vanessa took the stand, and her performance was slightly less convincing. There was something in her eyes, a calculated coldness that seeped through her mask of a concerned daughter-in-law. Carol has always been an independent woman, Vanessa declared. But in the last few months, we've seen her change. She forgets conversations we've just had. She once mistook me for her dead sister. We found her in the garden at 3 a.m, completely disoriented. Every lie was like a nail in my coffin. Judge Morrison took careful notes, his expression growing more grave with each testimony. When Linda Fisher testified by phone from her home, confirming the supposed observations of erratic behavior, I felt the floor open up beneath me. Even though Rachel had spoken to her and Linda had promised to tell the truth, she now sounded terrified and only confirmed her original statement. Yes, Your Honor, she said in a trembling voice. I've seen. Concerning behaviors. Carol seemed confused. After 2 hours of devastating testimony, it was our turn. Arthur stood with a confidence that contrasted dramatically with my internal panic. Your Honor, he began, what we are witnessing today is not the loving attempt of a family to protect their matriarch. It is the most calculated and cruel example of elder fraud I have seen in 4 decades of legal practice. The change in the courtroom's atmosphere was immediate. The reporters leaned forward. Judge Morrison raised his eyebrows. Michael and Vanessa exchanged nervous glances. The medical documents submitted by the petitioner are not only forged, Arthur continued, but they were created by an individual with a criminal record for fraud who has participated in a criminal network specializing in stealing the assets of the elderly through fraudulent declarations of mental incompetence. Arthur methodically presented every piece of evidence: the forged documents, Ryan Herrera's criminal record, the handwriting analysis confirming my signature had been forged, the records of the criminal network of fraud clinics. But the most dramatic moment came when Patricia Evans took the stand. The young doctor was clearly nervous, but her testimony was devastating. "Your Honor," she said in a clear voice, "when I came on my shift and reviewed Mrs. Miller's case, I immediately noticed serious irregularities. A brain surgery had been authorized and performed without the patient's consent, based solely on documents we now know to be forgeries." Judge Morrison leaned forward. "Doctor, are you saying an unconsented brain surgery was performed on Mrs. Miller?" "Exactly, Your Honor. And when I confronted Mrs. Miller with this information, she was completely lucid and appropriately outraged. She showed no signs of mental confusion or cognitive decline. Her reaction was exactly what I would expect from any competent person who discovered they had been the victim of such a violation. And in your professional medical opinion, does Mrs. Miller show signs of dementia or mental incompetence?" "Absolutely not, Your Honor. Mrs. Miller is completely mentally competent. The symptoms described in the reports submitted by her son do not correspond in any way with my direct observation of the patient." When it was my turn to testify, I rose with my legs shaking but my mind clearer than it had been in days. Arthur had prepared me, but I knew this moment would define the rest of my life. "Your Honor," I began, "a week ago, I was a proud mother who trusted her son completely. I went to the hospital for a minor gallbladder surgery, believing my family loved me and would protect me. My voice grew stronger with each word. I woke up to discover that the son I had raised, whom I had loved unconditionally for 42 years, had authorized them to open my skull and tamper with my brain without my consent. And he didn't do it out of love or medical concern. He did it because he wants to steal my house, my savings, and my dignity." "And how do you feel about your son's petition to have you placed under a conservatorship?" Arthur asked. "I feel betrayed in the deepest way possible," I answered, looking directly at Michael. "But I also feel determined to fight, not just for myself, but for all the elderly people who have been victims of this kind of fraud. My mind is perfectly clear, Your Honor. Clear enough to know that my son is no longer the man I raised, and clear enough to know that I deserve justice." The cross-examination from Michael's lawyer was brutal, but I held firm. He tried to trip me up with complicated questions about dates and details, but Arthur had prepared me well. I answered every question with precision and confidence. "Mrs. Miller," the lawyer said in a condescending voice, "isn't it possible that your paranoia about your family is exactly the kind of symptom that indicates mental decline?" "It's not paranoia when you have forged documents as proof," I replied firmly. "It's not paranoia when you have medical records showing unauthorized brain surgery. It's not paranoia when you have evidence of a criminal network. It's survival." Judge Morrison called for a 30-minute recess to review all the evidence. Those were the longest 30 minutes of my life. I sat next to Arthur and Rachel, trying to read the judge's expression, trying to imagine what he was thinking as he reviewed the documents. When he returned, his expression was unreadable. He sat down, organized some papers, and finally spoke. "In my 23 years as a judge," he began, "I have seen many cases of genuinely concerned families trying to protect loved ones with dementia. I have also seen cases of elder abuse, but I have never seen a case that combines medical fraud, document forgery, and criminal conspiracy on such an elaborate scale." My heart was pounding so hard I thought the whole room could hear it. After reviewing all the evidence presented, Judge Morrison continued, "I find that the petition for conservatorship filed by Michael Miller not only lacks merit, but appears to be part of an elaborate criminal scheme to defraud Mrs. Carol Miller of her assets and her autonomy." The relief I felt was so intense I nearly fainted. Rachel grabbed my hand and squeezed it tightly. Arthur closed his eyes for a moment, as if he had been holding his breath for hours. But Judge Morrison wasn't finished. "More troubling still," he continued, his voice growing increasingly severe. The evidence presented suggests that Mrs. Miller was subjected to an unconsented brain surgery based on forged medical documents. This constitutes not only civil fraud, but potentially aggravated criminal assault. He turned directly to Michael and Vanessa, who were now as pale as ghosts. Mr. Miller, the actions described in this court, if true, represent one of the most despicable forms of elder abuse I have ever seen. Authorizing unconsented brain surgery on your own mother to facilitate the theft of her estate is an act of cruelty that defies all human understanding. Michael tried to stand up to respond, but his lawyer forced him back down. Vanessa had tears running down her face, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were the panic tears of someone who knew she had been caught. Therefore, Judge Morrison declared, I not only deny the petition for conservatorship, but I order the following. First, all documents related to this case will be immediately referred to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. Second, I order a full investigation into the criminal network mentioned in the testimony. Third, Mr. Michael Miller and Mrs. Vanessa Miller are prohibited from having any contact with Mrs. Carol Miller while this investigation is pending. The judge's gavel struck the sound block, echoing through the room like a cannon shot. I had won. But more than that, I had exposed a criminal conspiracy that could save other seniors from suffering what I had suffered. As we were leaving the courtroom, Michael tried to approach me. His mask of the concerned son was gone completely, replaced by something I had never seen on his face before. Pure hatred. This isn't over, he hissed under his breath as he passed me. You're going to regret this, you crazy old woman. Those words confirmed that I had made the right decision. The son I had raised was long gone, replaced by this cruel stranger who was willing to destroy his own mother's mind for money. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Reporters wanted interviews. The district attorney's office wanted detailed testimony. Arthur worked with the authorities to track down the criminal network that had facilitated the fraud. A week after the hearing, Arthur came to Rachel's house with extraordinary news. Carol, he said, clearly excited, the investigation has uncovered something incredible. This criminal network has been operating for at least 5 years, and they've identified more than 40 victims. 40, I repeated, horrified. 40 families have gone through this. 40 seniors declared mentally incompetent through forged medical documents and unconsented surgeries. Most lost control of their finances and properties. Some were institutionalized against their will. 3 died under suspicious circumstances after the brain surgeries. The scale of the horror took my breath away. I had been lucky. I had Rachel. I had found Patricia. I had the strength to fight. But how many other seniors had been alone, confused, with no one to believe their side of the story? There's more, Arthur continued. The FBI has arrested 12 people in connection with this network, including 4 doctors, 3 lawyers, and several family members who participated in the schemes. Ryan Herrera has agreed to cooperate with the authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence, and Michael and Vanessa were arrested this morning. The charges include conspiracy, fraud, forgery, and aggravated battery. If convicted, they could face up to 20 years in prison each. 20 years. My son could spend the next 2 decades in prison for what he had done to me. Part of me felt a deep sadness for the boy I had raised, for the young man who had so much promise. But that sadness was overshadowed by the satisfaction of knowing that justice was being served, not just for me, but for all the victims of this horrible network. 2 months later, I received an unexpected call. It was a woman named Isabel, 73 years old, who had seen my story on the news. Mrs. Miller, she said in a trembling voice, I think my son did the same thing to me that yours did to you, but everyone tells me I'm crazy, that I'm imagining things. Could you help me? That call changed my life in a way I had never anticipated. With Arthur's help, we began to investigate Isabel's case. We discovered she had indeed been the victim of a similar scheme, though not directly connected to the network that had targeted me. Soon, other people began to contact me. Seniors who had been betrayed by their own families, who had lost their autonomy and dignity, who had been labeled as demented when they tried to defend themselves. I decided I couldn't stay silent. With part of the estate I had managed to protect, I established a foundation to help victims of elder fraud. I called it silenced voices, because that's what we had all been, voices silenced by those who were supposed to love us. The foundation offers free legal services, independent medical evaluations, and emotional support for seniors who suspect they are being victimized by their families. We also work with lawmakers to create stronger laws to protect the elderly from this type of abuse. 6 months after my court hearing, Paul, the chief of staff at the hospital where I had been operated on, asked me to give a presentation to the medical staff about the warning signs of elder-related medical fraud. "Dr. Evans," he said, referring to Patricia, who now worked as my assistant at the foundation, "your courage in speaking up about the irregularities you noticed has saved not only Mrs. Miller, but potentially dozens of other victims." Patricia smiled, but I could see she still carried some guilt for not having acted sooner. "I only did what any ethical doctor should do," she said, "but it scares me to think how many similar cases I may have seen without recognizing them." "That's exactly why we're here," I replied, "to train medical professionals, social workers, and legal staff to recognize the signs of this type of fraud before it's too late." The presentation was emotional. I shared my full story, from waking up confused in the hospital to the moment the judge denied the conservatorship petition. I could see tears in the eyes of several doctors and nurses as I described what it felt like to discover that my own son had authorized unconsented brain surgery. "The most important thing I want you to remember," I told them at the end, "is that age does not equal incompetence. Just because someone is 60, 70, or 80 years old doesn't automatically mean they can't make their own decisions. And when a young family member urgently insists that an elder is incompetent, especially when there's money or property involved, those are huge red flags." After the presentation, a young resident approached me. "Mrs. Miller," he said, "I think I have a patient right now who might be in a similar situation. A 78-year-old woman came in for a hip surgery, but her daughter is insisting on additional procedures that the patient says she never authorized." My heart raced. Another potential victim, another family destroyed by greed. "Take me to her right now," I said immediately. The 78-year-old woman's name was Elena, and when I walked into her room, I immediately saw the same fear and confusion in her eyes that I had felt months before. She was hooked up to several machines, and medical documents were scattered on the table beside her bed. "Elena," I said softly, approaching her bed, "my name is Carol. I've come because I think we might have something in common." Her eyes filled with tears instantly. "You too," she whispered. "Your family betrayed you too?" Over the next 2 hours, Elena told me a story that was painfully similar to mine. She had come in for a routine hip surgery, but her daughter had authorized additional procedures without her consent. Now the daughter was trying to convince the doctors that Elena had advanced dementia and needed to be permanently institutionalized. "But I don't have dementia," Elena insisted in a shaky voice. "I manage my own house. I cook for my neighbors. I read 3 books a week. My daughter says I'm confused, but the only confusion I have is why she's doing this." With the help of the resident who had alerted me, we reviewed Elena's medical documents. The patterns were identical. Psychiatric reports from a doctor who didn't exist, statements from neighbors describing behaviors that had never occurred, a daughter suddenly concerned about her mother's safety after years of minimal contact. "Elena," I told her, taking her hand, "you are not alone, and you are not crazy. What is happening to you is a crime, and we are going to stop it." Arthur arrived at the hospital that afternoon with a team of investigators. In less than 24 hours, we had documented enough evidence to prove that Elena's daughter was following the same criminal playbook that Michael and Vanessa had used on me. But Elena had something I hadn't had: an early warning. We were able to intervene before she was declared incompetent, before she lost control of her finances, before her daughter could complete the theft of her estate. When we confronted Elena's daughter with the evidence, she collapsed immediately. Unlike Michael and Vanessa, who had fought to the bitter end, she admitted everything. She had been in contact with the same criminal network, had paid $20,000 for their services of document forgery and legal manipulation. "I needed the money," she cried. "I have gambling debts. My husband lost his job. We're about to lose our house. I saw Carol's story on the news and I thought it would be easy." "Easy?" I shouted, feeling all the rage I had contained for months. "You thought it would be easy to destroy your own mother's mind? You thought it would be easy to steal her dignity and her autonomy? Elena, from her hospital bed, looked at her daughter with a sadness that broke my heart. Martha, she said softly, if you needed money, why didn't you just ask me for help? You know I would have helped you. I've always helped you. Because it wasn't enough, Martha sobbed. I needed everything. The house, the savings, everything. And I knew you wouldn't give it to me willingly. Those words perfectly summed up the criminal mentality that had infected so many families. It wasn't about desperate need. It was about pure greed. These people didn't want help. They wanted total control over their parents' assets, no matter the human cost. Elena's case was resolved quickly. Martha was arrested and later sentenced to 8 years in prison. Elena regained full control of her finances and decided to donate a significant portion of her estate to our foundation. I want other mothers to be protected, Elena told me during one of our regular chats. I want no woman to have to go through the terror of waking up to discover her own family has betrayed her. As our foundation grew, we started getting cases from all over the country. Each story was unique in its details, but they all shared the same basic elements: greedy relatives, forged medical documents, desperate seniors whom nobody believed. One of the most shocking cases involved a 75-year-old man named Robert, whose grandson had orchestrated a particularly cruel scheme. Robert was a war veteran with a sizable military pension and a paid-off house. His grandson, who had a drug problem, had started gradually stealing money from Robert's accounts. When Robert realized the theft and confronted his grandson, the young man resorted to the same criminal network that had targeted so many others. Instead of admitting to the theft, he claimed Robert was paranoid and delusional and needed immediate psychiatric care. Robert was involuntarily committed to a psychiatric institution for 6 months before we were able to get him out. When we found him, he had lost 30 pounds, was deeply depressed, and had begun to doubt his own sanity. They told me so many times I was crazy, Robert confided during his first visit to our office, that I started to believe them. I started to think maybe I was imagining that my grandson had stolen from me. That is the most insidious aspect of this type of abuse. It doesn't just steal the victim's money and property, it steals their confidence in their own minds. The perpetrators use sophisticated gaslighting techniques to make their victims question their own reality. Working with Robert during his recovery taught me a lot about the resilience of the human spirit. Despite everything he had suffered, he managed to rebuild his self-confidence and eventually testified against his grandson in court. Mrs. Miller, Robert told me the day his grandson was convicted, "You gave me my life back. But more than that, you gave me back my faith that justice exists." As the months passed, my personal story began to take on a new shape in my mind. The betrayal by Michael and Vanessa was no longer just a personal wound. It had become the catalyst for a mission that was saving lives. A year after my court hearing, I received a call that completely surprised me. It was Patricia Evans, the doctor who had helped me escape the hospital. "Carol," she said, "I have news about Michael and Vanessa." My heart sped up. Since their arrest, I had tried not to think about them, not to let their betrayal continue to poison my present. "What kind of news?" "They're going to plead guilty. Their lawyer contacted me because they want to avoid a public trial. Michael apparently wants to make a statement." "What kind of statement?" "An apology. And he wants to confess everything publicly, including the names of other members of the criminal network who haven't been arrested yet." The thought of seeing Michael again filled me with conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to confront him, to scream at him, to make him understand the damage he had caused not just to me, but to dozens of other families. But another part of me, the part that had been his mother for 42 years, just felt a deep sadness for what he had lost. "Do I have to be there?" I asked. "It's not mandatory, but Carol, I think it might be important for your healing process. And it might also be important for the other victims to see that even the perpetrators can be held accountable." I decided to go. Not for Michael, but for all the other victims who needed to see that justice was possible, that criminals could be confronted, that the voices of the elderly could be heard and respected. On the day of the sentencing hearing, the courtroom was filled with victims and their families. I saw faces I recognized from our support groups. Elena was there, Robert was too, and dozens of other survivors who had found the strength to fight back against their own treacherous families. When Michael entered the courtroom in handcuffs, I barely recognized him. He had lost weight, he looked older, and for the first time in his adult life, he looked truly afraid. When Michael took the stand for his final statement, our eyes met for the first time since that hearing where he had tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. In his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen before: genuine shame. Not the shame of being caught, but the deep shame of someone who finally understood the magnitude of what he had done. "Your Honor," he began, his voice cracking, "there are no words that can express my regret for what I did. I not only betrayed my mother, the woman who sacrificed everything to raise me, but I participated in a system that victimized dozens of innocent seniors." His voice broke completely. "My mother taught me about honor, about protecting the vulnerable, about the importance of family, and I took those lessons and trampled all over them for greed. There is no forgiveness for what I did." Michael then turned to me. "Mom," he said, and hearing that word come out of his mouth felt like a knife twisting in my chest. "I know you can never forgive me. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know that what I did wasn't because I didn't love you. It was because greed turned me into someone I don't recognize." Tears were streaming down his cheeks now. "I authorized them to operate on your brain. Your brain, Mom. The brain that taught me how to walk, that helped me with my homework, that worried about me every single day of my life. There's no way to live with that." For the first time in over a year, I felt a pang of the love I had held for the child I had raised. But that love was now wrapped in so much pain I could barely breathe. "I want to confess my full involvement in this criminal network," Michael continued. "I want to give names, addresses, account numbers. I want every single person who participated in this to be brought to justice. Not to reduce my sentence, but because it's the right thing to do." Judge Morrison, the same judge who had presided over my original case, listened in silence. When Michael finished his statement, he addressed him directly. "Mr. Miller, in my 24 years as a judge, I have seen genuine remorse, and I have seen an act. Your confession appears genuine, but the damage you caused transcends any apology. You not only betrayed your mother, you betrayed the fundamental trust that underpins family and medical relationships in our society." The judge paused, reviewing his notes. "However, your cooperation with the authorities has resulted in the arrest of 18 additional members of this criminal network, and your testimony has been instrumental in returning over $2 million in stolen assets to elderly victims." $2 million. I couldn't fully comprehend the scale of the operation Michael had been a part of. "Therefore," the judge continued, "I sentence you to 15 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for 10 years. I hope you use that time to reflect on the consequences of your actions and to find some form of redemption to 15 years. My son would spend the next 15 years in prison. He would be almost 60 years old when he got out. I would be 82 if I was still alive." Vanessa received 12 years. Unlike Michael, she never showed genuine remorse. Even in her final statement, she tried to blame others for influencing her, to minimize her role in the conspiracy. After the hearing, as I was leaving the courtroom, Michael managed to approach me one last time. The guards had given him a few moments to say goodbye before taking him to prison. "Mom," he said softly, "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I'm going to dedicate every day of my sentence to trying to repair the damage I've caused. I've arranged for my entire estate, including my share of Dad's inheritance, to be donated to your foundation." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hug him, like I had 1,000 times when he was a boy and had made some mistake. But another part of me knew this was no childhood mistake. It was the deepest betrayal a mother could experience. "Michael," I said finally, "the son I raised would never have done what you did. I don't know who you are now, but I hope that in prison you can find a way to become the man I once thought you were." Those were the last words I ever spoke to him. The guards led him away, and I walked out of the courthouse to face the rest of my life without the son I had lost twice, first to his betrayal, and then to the consequences of that betrayal. The following years became the most meaningful of my life. The Silenced Voices Foundation grew into a national organization with offices in 12 states. We had helped over 300 victims of elder fraud, recovered more than $8 million in stolen assets, and seen over 100 perpetrators convicted. But more important than the numbers was the human impact. Elena became my co-director and one of my closest friends. Robert started a support program specifically for veterans who were victims of family fraud. Patricia left her medical residency to work full-time as our medical director, developing protocols for hospitals to identify unconsented surgeries. On my 70th birthday, we held a large celebration that also served as a fundraiser for the foundation. Over 500 people attended, including fraud survivors, medical professionals we had trained, lawmakers who had supported our legal reform initiatives, and reporters who had covered our work. During my speech that night, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun in that hospital bed 3 years ago. When I woke up from surgery and discovered my son's betrayal, I told the audience, I thought my life was over. I thought the trust I had placed in my family had been the most foolish decision of my life. But I have learned that betrayal, as devastating as it is, can also be a catalyst for a purpose we never imagined. My pain became protection for others. My outrage became action. My loss became a gain for hundreds of families who are now safe. I looked out at the audience and saw so many familiar faces, victims who had found justice, families that had been reunited, professionals who had learned to better protect their elderly patients. I can't get back the son I lost, I continued, but I can honor all the mothers, fathers, grandmothers, and grandfathers who have been betrayed by those they trusted most. I can ensure their voices are heard, their dignity is respected, and their value as human beings is never reduced to the dollars in their bank accounts. The ovation was overwhelming, but what moved me most was seeing Elena crying with joy in the front row, Robert clapping with a smile he had recovered after years of depression, and Patricia beaming with the pride of someone who had chosen to use her medical career to protect the most vulnerable. After the celebration, while Rachel and I were in my kitchen cleaning the last of the dishes, my sister asked me a question I had been expecting for years. Carol, she said softly, do you ever regret fighting? Do you ever wish you had just accepted the conservatorship and avoided all this pain? I thought about it carefully before answering. You know, I said finally, I think the version of me that existed before this betrayal would have accepted it. She would have believed that maybe she really was confused. She would have trusted that Michael knew what was best for me. And now? Now I know that age doesn't automatically make us incompetent. I know that we deserve respect and autonomy until the day we die, and I know that sometimes the people we love most are capable of betraying us in ways we could never imagine. I paused, looking out the window at the garden where Edward and I had planted rose bushes so many years ago. But I also know that pain can be transformed into purpose, that betrayal can be turned into protection for others, and that even at 70 years old, a woman can discover a strength she never knew she possessed. Rachel smiled and hugged me. The woman who woke up in that hospital bed 3 years ago was strong, but the woman standing here now is unstoppable. She was right. The Carol who had gone to the hospital for a simple gallbladder surgery had been a kind, trusting woman who put others' needs before her own. The Carol who now ran a national foundation was a woman who had learned that boundless kindness can be dangerous, but that kindness, combined with wisdom and determination, can change the world. Tonight, as I write these final words of my story, I am 70 years old, and I feel more alive than I have ever felt. Tomorrow, I fly to Seattle to testify before the state Senate about a new law that will require independent psychological evaluations before any brain surgery can be authorized by family members. Next week, I will give a presentation at Harvard University on the warning signs of elder medical fraud. Next month, our foundation will open its 15th office, this time in Denver. My lost son is serving his sentence, and while I have heard that he is working in rehabilitation programs and helping other prisoners with legal cases, we have not spoken since that day in court. Perhaps one day we will find a way to heal that wound, but for now, my focus is on the thousands of victims who still need our help. I have learned that true love is not blind. True love sees clearly, protects fiercely, and never accepts betrayal as the price of keeping family peace. I have learned that a 70-year-old woman can be as powerful as any warrior, and that justice, even when it comes late, always tastes sweet. I woke up from that surgery, a victim, but I